order. So for those of you that don't know, like maybe Chuck, I'm the president of the Santa Maria Camera Club, Cheryl Decker. We'd like to welcome you and thank you so much for your time tonight. Chuck is retired from the art and design department at Cal Poly. Chuck, would you tell us a little bit more about your photography background? I'd love to hear you describe a little about yourself.
Well, my first camera was a Minolta 35 millimeter, SLR camera, and it used something called film. Back in 1967, I think, and I love photography, but it wasn't my focus until digital came along, and when the first digital camera came out, I sold my Canon camera bodies and lenses and went full digital. That was about 20 years ago. Is that right? Yeah, 20 years ago. Up until that time, most of my work was in design. I was a designer, and fine art work, I was a painter. At Cal Poly, I taught graphic design. I did not teach photography. But on my bucket list when I retired was to do something with photography. And 2 years after I retired, opened G Clay Print and Photo. But at that time, it didn't call it G Clay Print and Photo because I wasn't into G Clay. I thought I was going to do classic and exotic car photography. And I soon found out that in this area, even though there's a lot of people who have classic and interesting cars, there just wasn't enough business to keep me going full time. I started to branch out into other areas that I like. And when people say, what kind of photography do you do? I do anything but weddings and open heart surgery. Choose open heart surgery.
Blame you.
Yes.
So also I added large format G Clay printing to my business. So I do about half and half in my business in G Clay Print and Photo and realized photography. I'm self-taught, and I love every day of it. About 6 months ago, I bought an iPhone Pro, iPhone 11 Pro Max. And I've been using it more than my other cameras because it goes with me everywhere I go. So, but that's my background in photography.
Fantastic.
Wonderful. Thank you. That's really interesting. So if we're ready, can we get started with our
We have 2 categories.
category? I don't know which one you have queued up first, Greg.
I'm going to go with color first.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
We're doing a run through first.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. We have 9 images in color.
Well, I should be good for 9th place. I'll be in the top 10 anyway.
Okay, this is our first image, Chuck. It's up to you.
This one is titled Dunes Sunrise.
Okay, let me find my notes. Okay, here we go. Let me paraphrase or not paraphrase, but introduce some of my thinking here. First of all, I'm not a purist, and what I mean by that is that even though I believe photojournalism and documentary photography have their place, and their philosophy about photography is important because of the way they use their photographs, I believe all the rest of us are not as much photographers as we are image makers. And because we have so many options to manipulate images and to make them really artwork as much as photographs. And so I see a lot of possibilities when I look at an image, and I really believe that every photographer should take advantage of all of those options, or all those options they have available to them. If you want to be a purist, that's fine. That's great. I won't criticize you for it. But I do believe that it's more about image making than it is about taking an image and making it with the idea that it has to look exactly the way you saw it with your naked eye. So that's a preference that I would like to start out with. The other thing I would like to say is that I spent a lot of time with these images this afternoon, and I appreciate every one of these images for different reasons. Okay, dunes at sunrise. This is a very dramatic image. I'm a big fan of the dunes, and have a lot of my favorite images of my own are of the dunes. One of the things about the dunes, though, is that if you don't have a good sky, you might as well just crop all the sky out and just concentrate on the dunes. And that's a lot of times that's what I do. But on the days that you have interesting clouds, it just makes the images that much better. And this image, really, the clouds that you caught here and the shapes and what they do and how they create almost a one-point perspective towards that one dune that sort of looks like a volcano, really focuses the eye in this image. And yet at the same time, there's a lot of directional elements that allow our eye to move around and not just focus in the center. I love that you've captured a lot of great texture. I only have two criticisms. One is that I think the saturation is a bit overdone. I would tone back the saturation. It's a little bit too postcardish for me. And then the other thing I would suggest is maybe crop the sky down just a little bit more. Your horizon line is almost in the middle. It's above the middle slightly, but with this image and this type of image, I think the rule of thirds applies. And so even at the risk of cropping off a little bit of that cloud on the right-hand side might be helpful. At least I would suggest trying it and see if you like it better. So for composition, I gave this a 6. For technique, I gave it a 5, and again, because of the oversaturation. And for impact, I gave it a 6.
So 17 total.
Okay.
I'm going to have to do math tonight.
Okay. I don't really have to find this one.
This one is titled How Small We Really Are.
Yeah. This is an incredible image. And I've seen a lot of images of the desert and of Oh God, I'm blanking out here. Where is this? This is
Death Valley.
what? Death Valley.
Death Valley.
Yeah. And when I first looked at this image, I did enjoy it. Then I saw that tiny little figure down there and near the lower left-hand corner in that path, and that just blew me away. And one of the things that I did with all of the images was today I looked at them in Photoshop to check out resolution and sharpness and so on. And this is just a wonderful image. This image could have been a victim of too much contrast with the very strong highlights of that flat plane in the upper part of the image. And then this area, that area being in the sunlight, and then this area of the image being in the cast shadows of the clouds. It could have been just too much contrast. And so I would assume that maybe some work was done on this, and whatever work you did on it was the right thing to do. You can't see my cursor, right?
No,
No.
So
I'm going, hold on, I'll give you approval to count.
okay,
There you go.
okay. All right, here we go. So these darks over here, and here create a triangle. Here we have another dark up here. Those are really important for this composition. And they act to a certain degree as a balance to this being a focal point once you find it. So that arrangement of contrast is really important to the composition of this image, which goes beyond the subject matter. And are you seeing my cursor?
No,
Oh, you're not. Okay.
I don't know why. It worked earlier today when we did it.
This dark,
Oh, there it is. It showed up. Okay.
this dark, and this dark create a triangulation, and our eyes are really not consciously, but subconsciously we connect all of those together, right? And then again, when we see this tiny little figure down here, it becomes even a stronger focal point. And so all of those contrasting forms invite us to look at the whole image. And I'm going to talk about this some more in some later images, but go ahead and Greg and delete those so we can look at the image without those marks. Thank you. But this is, I think, is a really a fantastic image. I gave it 3 7s.
Oh,
That's 21,
21.
Elaine.
Yeah, 21. Thank you, Jim. This is titled Looking Out.
I want everybody to know that this 3 o'clock this afternoon, my dentist took my temperature, and so I'm fine. You don't have to worry about me. And I use sanitizer on my hands before I touch my
Keyboard.
I'm wearing a mask anyway.
I think this is another incredible image. It just has a lot going for it, and certainly the subject matter is really exciting and fun and curious and warm-hearted, and there's a lot of things you could say about the subject matter. When I looked at this image, and I just wanted to look at this little character more, and I didn't realize that squirrels' feet were that big, especially their back feet. So, but the technique is wonderful. This was you were at the right place at the right time with the right lens. The character of the subject and the body language, the expression is dead on. I just have one tiny little suggestion, and that would be to crop off maybe 10% or 5% on the left side. then the squirrel won't feel quite so centered, but I just don't think that you need all of that. It's wonderful that that area in the background is out of focus, that you've shortened up the depth of field again, so we concentrate on the real subject of this image. But I think you don't need quite that much on the left side. I would just crop off. If this whole image is 12 inches wide, I'd crop off 3/4 of an inch on the left side. So I gave the composition a 6.5, if I can do that, and the technique and the impact are 7.
We have to have a total score of an even number. I believe, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a whole number, not an even number.
I mean, the whole number, correct, yeah.
Okay, yeah, because I could give one of them a 7.5, and it would come out as a whole number.
Right, exactly.
Well,
So,
if we end up with a tie, then what do we do?
then we'll go back to them and we'll ask you to break the ties.
Okay. Well, then we have a tie. This one says it's 3 7s.
Okay.
Okay.
This is a pear, cabbage, melon, cucumber.
Okay, I'm looking for my notes here.
I'm sorry, Elaine,
It wouldn't fit on the card.
Okay, that's what I'm looking at. What would the correct title be, Greg?
Off the top, ask Cheryl. Cheryl, you want to say the whole title?
pear, cabbage, melon, cucumber, an homage to Juan Sanchez Cotan's Prince cabbage, melon, cucumber.
LOL.
I'm not writing it all down. I'm sorry.
Needed the pixel limit.
I'll give you a 7 for having the longest title. This is a really fun image. I went online and I looked up Juan Sanchez Cotan, and I found the image that you were parodying here, and but I looked at a lot of his other images, and it is a fun idea. But I have a real problem with the composition. And it looks like there was one image that was very similar to this that he had actually photographed and documented, and then I looked at the others. And I will tell a little short story here about myself. I've always been a big fan of Edward Hopper, and when they had the Edward Hopper retrospective show that traveled around the United States and came to San Francisco at the Museum of Contemporary Art, I went to see that show, and I was very happy, very excited that I found at least one bad painting. What I thought was a bad painting. And the reason why I was pleased with that is because it reminded me that we're not all perfect, and even Edward Hopper wasn't perfect and did a bad painting now and then. And I think Juan Sanchez Cotan led you astray. I think he did a bad painting, and here's why. If you look at all of his other paintings, there are, I need my pointer back here.
Okay, you got it.
All right. This big black space is it's haunting. and it's distracting. It makes us, it draws too much attention away from what's going on here. And I know, yeah, this stuff is the stuff that we focus on, but in terms of, it's sort of like listening to a classical concert, and somewhere in the middle of the concert, there's a long 10-minute delay. And no one's really quite sure whether or not they should clap or not. Is the concert over with? And then the music just starts up again. There was a critique in my meetup group one time, and one of the persons in the critique asked the person who had created the photography, the photograph, asked him, well, what do you want us to see? What's your subject matter? And someone said, all of it. And there's a lot of truth to that. Certainly in any photograph, you want a focal point. That is sort of the main issue, what you want people to see. And then everything around that should contribute to it. And when you have this much negative space in the image, it becomes a distraction. And it was the only painting by Catan that I saw that was like this. All of the others, he had other items of fruit and vegetables hanging in this area. And so it's a wonderful idea. I just think the composition just doesn't work. The other thing about it that I find a little troubling is the shadow. This cast shadow here. I would have either moved these two objects in this direction, and that would have helped your composition, or I would have lit this in a way that this shadow wasn't quite so strong. And again, if you look at Catan's images, that shadow doesn't appear in his images. So if you're really wanting to use him as an example for your work, that would be a clue that I would pay attention to. So I hate to be so critical of this, but I have to make this point about composition. It's good that you have competition listed first, then technique, and then impact, because composition is everything. I gave composition, I gave this a 4. As far as technique, it's wonderful, it's sharp. The only problem I have is with the lighting and the shadows over here on this side are too strong. And then as far as impact, I gave it a 5 because, again, I think this big black space over here robs this image of its impact.
So what was that again, Chuck? That was a
4, 6, 5.
4, 6, 5. Okay.
Right.
So 15. Okay. A tree at sunset.
Okay. We have a similar problem here. We have a lot of, I hate to use the word empty space, but that's sort of the way I think we interpret it. I think the intent here was to make this tree look really lonely, and by it, out on this flat plane by itself. And then also this intent was to give a lot of space for this interesting red sky. But if you look at this image, try to look at this image with your eyes out of focus. I don't know if you can do it. It's what I call looking at it with your at the entire image at once. The black of the tree and the foreground contrasted against that sky is so strong that what's happening in the sky, the detail in the sky is getting lost. So I would say, if you could, go back into this image and bring out the contrast in the sky a lot more. At least in the top half. You know, maybe
Okay,
maybe from this line up, give that more contrast up there, and that will help a lot to visually balance off what's going in the lower foreground. I think this so much of that sky. The other thing you could do is just crop it. You know, from this line up, just crop that whole thing out, and that would help a lot. Having a lot of negative space is not a bad idea if you can make it work by either implying that something's moving into that negative space and needs that room, or that it's in enough balance with the rest of the image that it doesn't feel so empty. And I think in this case, it just it's again too much negative space. So if the sky had more interest, if there was more detail, more, you know, even if you had one little bird up here, a little bird, you know, little bird up there, that would make a huge difference. It really would. Our eye wants to move around and connect things together. It's called the Gestalt response, where we can make connections. If I put, you know, if I put 3 dots in a tree, now what it created is you link these together, and you see, not literally, but you see a form there. Our mind wants to connect those together. There's nothing for this tree to connect with in the rest of the image. Okay. So did I give you numbers?
No.
Okay. Again, composition 4, technique a 6, and impact a 6. I think this is an impactful image because of the content and the strong contrast and color. But I think it would just have more impact if we had something more in the negative image, a negative part of the image, the sky, to connect with that tree somehow.
Okay. A desert market.
Okay. Now, personally, I really like this image a lot. And I like places like this. And I think that wherever you shot this was it, you took a good opportunity with the clouds, the sky, and the subject matter. Not as much, but you have somewhat of the same problem as the other two. This subject matter over here, here I go again. I'm using my cursor, expecting you to see it.
okay,
All right. This stuff over here saves your composition because it gives us something to connect to on this side of the image. Now, I know that clouds are over here, and they're pretty dramatic and so on, and that helps too. But this is so high contrast compared to everything else that obviously this part is your dominant part of your image. What I would suggest, if you want to go ahead and get rid of these lines for me, Greg. I would go back and
okay,
I would go back and bump up this value right in here. That light area where there's a little bit of sunlight poking through, I'd bump that up. In fact, I would do the same thing with the clouds here. This light spot right there. bring that value up a lot. And so you have some more lights against these darks that compete with everything that's going on here. I hope that makes sense. I hope we can get rid of those lines. The only other issue I have with this, no, I have two more issues. One is the road. The road is just too nice. The road is just, it's too fresh for this image. And in fact, while I was looking at this image, I tried cropping it. Can you give me a?
Yeah.
There
There you go.
Okay. I tried cropping it right here. And I know you're losing some stuff here, and I know there's a reason for that road. I think that creates a very dynamic, you can go ahead and get rid of that line. It creates a very dynamic line, which, you know, takes our eyes back here, and then we come across into this, and there's a lot very strong 1 point perspective going on here towards where the road goes and the destination. But I know you can say, yeah, but that's the way the road was. I know, but tough. It would just be, I'm just talking about how to make this better. I don't think it ruins your photograph, but I think this would have been so much better if this road was, you know, a dirt road or a road that had a lot of patches and tar marks on it and so on. And then, of course, the other thing are the power lines. And I know, you know, they're so hard and it's so disappointing that they were there, but I still think they're a distraction. It's too good of an image otherwise to allow those power lines to be there. I would go in and take, you know, 10 or 15 hours in Photoshop and take them out. So, okay. So I gave the composition a 5 and the technique a 7 and the impact a 6.
18, right? Yeah.
Oh, well,
Okay. Lionfish.
yeah, this is another very powerful image. Let me find my notes. My dog's talking to me here. I'm not going to play with you now. This image has, again, a similar problem in terms of too much negative space in the wrong part of the image or whatever. It's a wonderful, beautiful image. I love the lighting, the detail. I love the way the fish is facing us and appears to be sort of looking at us and maybe moving towards us. And I think the rays of light coming down from the upper right-hand corner contribute a lot to that. And they somewhat save the composition. If you look closely over in that area, you'll also see some little fish. But I still think, okay, here's what I'd do to save it. I'd either crop off half of this, half of the blue space. I'd either, you know, crop it here or maybe crop it there. Or I would go in and make these rays stronger, give them more light, and I would make these little fish. There's some fish here and so on. I would give them a little bit more color and light. Give us something over here to balance off, a little bit of balance. That's a lot. It doesn't have to be the exact amount of visual weight, but some little thing over here could help balance this composition a lot. So So that's about all I have to say about that one. I gave it a 4 in composition, a 7 in technique, and a 6 in impact.
So 17. Okay, portal between philosophies.
Yeah. It's a very striking image, very powerful, as is the other one. There's another one that's in the monochromatic category. And, but this one, obviously, the photographer went beyond just documentation and added a whole nother dimension to it by allowing that Mount Whitney and the sky inside the portal to be a different dimension because of the color. The technique is perfect. I gave that a 7, and I think I gave it a 7 in impact. I just have one question about it. I understand why you did it, I believe, but I would be really curious to see the rest of the sky above this rock formation. I'd like to see that. I'd like to see what it looks like with that blue also. I don't think that would weaken your concept. You'll notice that as you move back into this space, this foreground is also gray or seems to be monochromatic. This rock is also inside the portal and it's monochromatic, okay? So as you go from the bottom of this image towards the top of the portal, it gets more and more colorful. And that's your different philosophy. I think that if you were to make these areas, let that sky continue into those areas, I don't think you'd be violating your concept. And so that's the only question I have. For some, it's just a question. I'm not absolutely sure about it, but it's a troubling question to me, and I'd want to see it with the blue in the sky above. Okay, thanks. And so I gave the composition a 6.
So a 20 altogether.
I wanted to give it a 6.5, but I can't do that. So a 6,
Okay.
7. Okay.
Wayne Pendergrass.
Okay, this is a really fun image. I like this image a lot. The composition is very strong, and I think even the fact that I think you were really thinking composition when you left. Okay. Let's try it again here, Greg.
It says start annotating.
Yeah, okay. The fact that you left this in the image and you left this in the image and the sky, the way the sky is up here, the clouds and so on, you were thinking composition. And I think that really works, and I applaud you for that. So I gave you a 7 on composition. The only discomfort I have with the image is the lighting on Paul Wayne here is not the same lighting that's suggested by the sky and where the sun is. I would have lighted him with more backlighting, even some rim lighting along the edge of him. You have some rim lighting, or what appears to be rim lighting here, but it's from above. It's from a different direction. It's from above direction as opposed to where the sun is in this image. So the background and the main subject don't appear to be in the same space and the same reality. And be okay, but I find it questioning. I find it questionable in terms of the effect of the image. So I would be, I would wish for you to, if you could, to try something different with that. So I gave you your technique a 5. And then the only other thing is his expression. We, all of us are people watchers. Every one of us. We may not be educated in it, but we learned at a very, very early age to pay attention to people's expressions and body language as to how we would interpret. That's why email is such a dangerous place to send a message.
Hallelujah.
That smile at the same time, you're telling the other person that you hate their guts. I mean, you know, his facial expression to me, and I'm going to, for lack of a better term, is a little bit too duh. Obviously, he's singing, but it's sort of like you caught him at the wrong part of this, of whatever he's vocalizing here. And so that's a little sad to me. It's a little disappointing to me. So I think a better expression on his face would help this a lot. So I gave 6 for impact.
So we got 18, right? 5, 10, 12, yeah, 18.
Right.
Okay. So we have tie to break between number 2 and number 3. And we need to pick a first and a second from those 2.
Okay, so those 2.
Yes.
Okay, seeing them together, I'm going to break the tie with the squirrel. Only because that squirrel image is so dramatic. The lighting in it, contrast, and the detail is very, very striking and very, very dramatic. And so I would give it a better score, a higher score in impact.
Okay. We are ready.
Okay.
This is A Dunes Sunrise by Gregory Doudna.
Okay. And
How Small We Really Are, and second place by Elaine Calvert. Looking Out, and our first place by Jeannie Sparks.
hey, congratulations.
A Pear, Cabbage, Melon, Cucumber, sorry for the rest of the title, by Cheryl Decker.
Cheryl, I hope I wasn't too hard on you.
I think she's muted.
She's afraid of what you might say.
Okay.
No, I muted most of
I
them.
happen to like it.
Tree at Sunset by Larry Decker. Desert Market by Ed Powell.
Concept and how much work went into producing.
Lionfish by Jeannie Sparks. And Philosophies, and third place by Gregory Doudna.
Oh, yeah.
Nice job.
Wayne Pendergrass by Ed Powell.
I thought that was you, and you surprised me with something crazy.
No, you're only allowed to enter one category.
Now what happened?
Okay.
Okay, we have 7 images in monochrome.
Are you going to do these, Penny, or do you want me to do these? Or
I'm prepared to do them.
okay, good.
Ooh. Nice.
Okay, it's our first image.
Just so everybody knows, I guess we're not all muted.
Okay,
Okay.
the title for this is Did You Call Me?
Okay. This is another fun image. I love dogs. And I love dogs that have one spot on their eye. And I think that spot on the dog's eye takes us back in time to, our gang comedies and the Little Rascals and so on. There was always a dog in those old movies, old silent movies, that had a spot on one eye. And hence, I think that's why going to this sepia tone made sense. It takes us back in time too, and the fact that it appears to be faded around the outer edges. The only thing you could do would maybe to go and cut the edges and make them rough, or put a fold in the middle of it or something to make it look like an older photograph. I gave it, in terms of technique, I gave it a 7. Composition, the subject matter obviously is the dog. I would be tempted to crop in, give the dog a little bit more size in this image, and then I would also move him a little off center, a little less centered. You see, he's sort of almost, but not quite. He's neither really exactly in the center or is he off center. So I would move him one way or the other, and maybe up or down, get him more out of the center of the image. So I gave the composition a 6 and the impact a 6.
And I missed the other part of the score.
Composition a 6.
Thank you.
Seven was a 766. Did you say?
Yeah, 6,
Yeah.
7, 6.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's a 19.
Yeah.
Flood tide on the Tamar River.
I'm looking for my notes, sorry. Okay. It's a gorgeous image. Perfect for black and white. Technique, I gave it a 7. Composition, I gave it a 6, and for 2 reasons. Again, the sky. The sky is so flat. And when I taught composition at Cal Poly, I talked a lot about this, that, yeah, the sky was like that. So, what could I do? Well, yeah, I'm sorry. I have gone into some of my photographs and added clouds just to make the sky more interesting. There's so much going on.
Okay.
Below this line, there's so much beautiful stuff going on, and what's up here just can't compete. So I would either, you got two or three possibilities. One is to crop it and lose maybe part of this. I don't know. That might be a terrible solution, would be to crop it. Another would be to go in Photoshop or Lightroom and play around with contrast and or clarity and see if you can get a little more definition of clouds. It looks like there may be some variation in light and dark up there, but I think if you could get some more detail up there, would improve your image quite a bit. As I say, it's a very, very good, strong image to begin with, but just to make it better is to get something going on up here. The other thing would be a bird, something up there. I often we'll see some images where the people have dropped in, a line of trees and leaves coming in up here in the other area just to get something going on in that upper left-hand corner. So that's one thing. The other thing that I find a little awkward, and that
Okay.
the alignment of these boats with the top of that wall. I wish the camera angle was 6 inches higher, so that there wasn't some confusion about these objects and shapes in here. This is why you should always take, for one picture, take a dozen from different angles and move your camera around and take a lot of shots coming from different angles, because a lot of times you won't see this sort of alignment or misalignment or whatever. This is not a misalignment. This is an alignment, but it's an alignment that confuses the image a little bit. A lot of times you don't see that until you get back in the studio and you download the images. So that's not nearly as much of a problem, I think, as the sky issue up here. So let's see. So composition, I gave it a 6, technique a 7, and impact a 6.
Okay, total of 19.
All right.
Mobius arch.
Don't tell me now, but I'd be curious to know if this is a different person. It's a different lens, slightly different angle. It's gorgeous. it has wonderful details in the shadows as well as nice control of the highlights. It's just a gorgeous image. I'm going to give this one 3 7s. So, which means we're going to have a problem again. We're going to have a tie.
That's okay.
Because I gave this one 3 7s.
The title on this is Montaña de Oro Coast.
Wonderful use of extended exposure with high density filters and selection of subject for this. I know this isn't Winter Craw's image because it doesn't have a single floating cloud in the sky. But what I really appreciate about this image is how
What he likes is very predictable.
Ed, quiet.
how these lines are empathetic with these lines. You know, and then, I mean, how this all seems to go together in such beautiful harmony. It's just a wonderful image, wonderful contrasting values. Go ahead and erase those ugly red lines. It's just a marvelous image, beautiful. Even out here are these kind of sneak up on you, but there's 3 little birds out here. Those are nice. So this one's a 21. Okay. Fun.
This is base at table edge number 1.
You know what the difference between a vase and a vase is? Anybody know?
The
Right.
cost,
It's about $35.
Right.
Okay. I love it when people play around with still life and, you know, kind of, again, make their own image, create their own image. This one's really, really fun. And it feels, you know, it has some timelessness to it. But guess what I'm going to say about it? I bet you can't all guess what I'm going to say about it. I know that you want this image to feel almost out of balance. You want us to feel uncomfortable with it. You want us to feel like at any moment it's going to collapse, and, you know, but the composition still has to be balanced. Okay, here's my suggestion. And you don't have to take my suggestion. Put something up here. Maybe it's something that is going to contribute to this impending catastrophe. Maybe it's another ball that appears to be floating, not floating in space, but moving in space. Maybe it's a feather. Maybe it's a brick. Okay.
talk later.
Nice talking. Anyway, I don't know if that's exactly the right spot to put it. You know, maybe something more casual might maybe be here, but something for our eye up in this area, something for us to balance out what's all going on down here. The only other thing I would try is instead of a solid black square, I would make it a dark gray. I think the solid black is just a little bit too much contrast for the rest of the image. The image is too subtle and soft and antique-y to be that solid black. Okay, so composition a 6, technique 7, impact 7.
Okay, 21 or 20.
Okay, another fun image.
Yeah, our title is Man in Black on Ladder Number 2.
Fun. I laughed out loud when I saw this. And I applaud this person's visual sense of humor. I gave it a 7 in terms of composition. It really invites us to look at the whole image with relatively the same amount of interest. I only have one criticism of it. The birds look like they belong in this image. He looks like he belongs in this image, except I would come in and drop in a little cast shadow down here. It doesn't have to be a sharp edge shadow, but just a little. I would make this all a little darker under here. Not under here, but on here, to make him feel more grounded. Right now, he tends to float a little bit. And the same thing with these two vases over here. They don't quite feel like they belong in this space. They feel pasted on. And I think it would probably work very well for you. First, I would move them up a little bit so they don't appear to be resting on the, again, I'm pointing and you're not seeing me point. They appear to be resting on the bottom of the frame, which is not a good idea. So I would move them up just slightly to get them off the bottom of the frame. And then I would go in and darken it a little bit around the base so it feels like they're casting a shadow on the sand. To make them feel a little bit more grounded. So a 7 on composition and a 6 on technique and a 7 on impact.
Okay, that's
20.
20. Thank you. And this title is Ross Castle Killarney.
Still looking for my notes. Well, I know what I want to say about it. I don't need my notes. This is a fantastic composition. The way we are led into this composition, actually from the foreground to this subject back here. Okay, so that's a very strong compositional devices. We do enter the image. Our tendency is to enter every image from the bottom, and in our culture to rotate clockwise in the image. This takes us back into this castle form here in the back, which is a strong strong center point. But how do we get back to the foreground if we're taken back to this space with no way to get back to the foreground? And we have a very uninteresting sky. Well, this tree forms, this vegetation solves that problem. So I know it could be taken as just filling up space to be filling space, but all of those elements serve to pull this composition together as a whole. And so it works very, very well. It's sort of classical in that sense. I mean, how many paintings have we ever seen with a boat in the foreground that leads us to the horizon, leads us back into the horizon line? That's fairly common. Technique, I would give it, composition, I give it a 7. Impact, I give it a 7. And technique, I want to give it a 6. And here's why. I was down in San Diego at a painting gallery about 35 years ago. And this gallery had some painter in the gallery whose little shtick was to extend the painting out onto the matte frame so that the painting wasn't contained in the matte frame. It grew, the parts of the image grew out over onto the matte frame. And so here were all these paintings with this same little gimmick in all of them. And it just annoyed the hell out of me. Because it was so so much of a gimmick, but it also demonstrated a lack of understanding of what a matte and a frame are about. What are they for? When we sit in a movie theater, the entire movie theater is black and we're looking at the screen. The reason why that contrast exists is because the movie creators want our full and undivided attention on that screen. They don't want us to be distracted by anything else in that environment. And I know most movie theaters aren't completely black, but still the point is that what's important here is the image, not the matte frame. The matte frame and the frame itself serve as a sort of visual no man's land between the image and the wall it's hung on, or whatever background it has around it. So it serves to separate us both visually and psychologically from the world that's inside the frame from the world that's outside the frame. And so this treatment to me, has that problem in that it's too much like the image. It looks too much like part of the image just projected out. Now, if you were to make that texture, say, more abstract so that it didn't appear to look like some of the foliage in the image, and it just became just kind of a nondescript, like a burnt edge, I think that would be okay. But this has a tendency, I think, to it tends to be a distraction. I don't want to look at that. I don't want to consider that as part of my enjoyment of the rest of this image. So I gave it a 7 for composition, a 6 for technique, and a 7 for impact.
Okay.
Okay, we have first off a tie for 22 21s for first and second, number 3 and number 4. Mobius Arch, and Montaña de Oro Coast.
I'm going to go with Montaña de Oro. I love that image.
Okay, and then between these three, the 5, 6, 7, those three images received 21 or 20s, and we just have one of these three would be third place.
Okay. The vase on the edge, I would give third place.
Yes, sir. Okay, we're ready to do our final show.
Right.
Did You Call Me by Cheryl Decker. Flood Tide on the Tamar River by Tony Martindale.
Nice.
Mobius Arch in second place by Larry Decker. Montaña de Oro Coast, first place by Elaine Calvert.
Beautiful, Elaine.
Thanks.
Vase at Table Edge number 1 in third place by Jim McInnes.
Cool, Jim.
Man in Black on Ladder number 2 by Jim McInnes.
Oh,
Ross Castle Killarney by Tony Martindale.
I had different results. They're the same maker, so I don't know that it matters. But I had the man in black on a ladder as third place.
No.
No?
The
No.
vote was for third place.
Okay.
It was a tie and he broke it for the vase.
Oh, okay. I was looking at the vases on the bottom corner of the.
No, no, no.
Okay. Okay, that's how I goofed up.
Thank
Okay.
you for double checking.
No problem. Nice images, everybody.
Nobody has any questions?
Good, clean fun, and nobody gets pregnant.
That you know of.
I appreciated how you drew the marks on the images. I mean, that's something we haven't had in the past since, when we were live, people couldn't draw on the images. I mean, we had pointers and stuff,
Yeah.
but
Well, he asked today at 4:30. And we figured it out.
Thank you, Greg.
I thought
That was really good. It's really good.
And I think that we should provide that option to future judges. Greg, if you're able to.
I will add it to my list of options.
It just made it very easy to understand what you were telling us. And so
I certainly appreciated, Chuck, your in-depth evaluation of each image. Thank you so very much. This has been so instructional. Especially, I think you have such an insight into the composition of images, and I really appreciated and have learned from what you instructed us tonight. Thank you so very much for being with us.
Thank you.
thank you.
Great having you, Chuck.
Thank you for the opportunity. I hope I wasn't too brutal.
No.
I would like to make one comment. I've seen Elaine's work. I've been watching her work through my meetup group for what, 4 or 5 years now. And Elaine is the most improved photographer in my meetup group.
Thank you.
She has really grown as a
No
photographer.
pressure. I really tried hard to find images that you wouldn't recognize as being mine.
Well, you know what? What I guess that Ron's had absolutely nothing to do with that.
Well, Chuck, I'd have to say you're right. Having watched Elaine's work for the last 5 years, it's getting better and better.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. You guys are,
Yep, she's the best.
no, I'm always really shocked when I mean, I like my images, obviously, but when I see the competition, I'm always, oh, wow,
Yeah.
should have stayed home kind of a feeling. And, I'm always surprised when I can compete. So thank you.
you all, and I'd be happy to do it again.
Right.
Right.
Thank you, Chuck.
Okay.
Chuck, I want to just add my appreciation too, that you gave very specific suggestions on how to make an image better. I think that's very helpful. I really appreciate that.
Good. All right.
Yes. Great to see you, Chuck.
Nice to see you all.
Yes.
Thank you.
Good night.
Chuck.
Good night, Kathy.
Good night. Thank
Everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Oh, yeah.